So hi everyone, my name is Dasha Ilina. I'm an artist working with and around technology, more so with, or rather around. Anyway, so before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you to the whole Drugomore team for such a warm welcome. It's been very nice to be here. And so I'm going to present this talk titled Inside the Infinite Office, which is, the Infinite Office is a term that Mark Zuckerberg uses himself to describe the metaverse, this kind of now sidelined project of virtual reality space that Facebook owns. And I found the term in an article which itself has an incredible title, Mark Zuckerberg's Metaverse Already Sucks. So this article is now very old in internet years. As you can see, it's from, well, maybe you can't see, it's very small, but it's from 2021, which now, you know, feels like it was forever ago, and is also a good reminder of the fact that the metaverse was supposed to happen a long time ago and still hasn't happened, and hopefully never will. And yeah, so in this article is where I found the term the infinite office. And I remember writing it down in my notebook at the time and thinking, wow, this is really grim, but one day I'm going to have to do something about it. And today, this day has come. So this is all, of course, as we can see, long before Mark Zuckerberg kind of rebranded into looking like a white rapper that's kind of aligned with Trump and co. Hello, welcome. And of course, at the same time, I'm sure most of us know that even before he started kind of outwardly aligning with the kind of right wing of the United States, he was already, since a long time, completely detached from reality, and this has only gotten worse today. So one example of this is this quote that I found from the kind of founder's letter, which was published when Meta as a company was first kind of inaugurated, so when it became not just Facebook and not just Instagram, but Meta, which of course also came out with the metaverse. And so in this quote, Zuckerberg proposes to us to think about how many physical things you have today that could just be holograms in the future. The obvious aim here is, of course, to kind of take claim over all of the things that sort of populate our senses, so things that we come into physical contact with on a daily basis, turning them from physical objects in the physical reality into virtual realities. Another example is these new kind of Meta AI glasses in collaboration with Ray-Ban that kind of rely on a vision of a future in which everyone will just be wearing glasses all of the time, right? For this to work and for this to actually be widely implemented, we would all just have to wear these glasses that allow us to interact with virtual interfaces. And even just looking in this room, I mean, more than half of the people here are not wearing glasses. So it's interesting to see how these kind of tech CEOs project the future. But more importantly, it's also just kind of a more sophisticated version of something that already existed, which was the Google Glass, which we already stopped from happening a long time ago because we called the users that were wearing them glass holes, because ultimately these glasses were really ugly, were very expensive, and also did not serve a very clear purpose other than kind of promoting a deeper state of surveillance. But the most recent example comes from just over a week ago with this clip that I will play.
You know, one thing just from working on social media for a long time is there's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends. 3 people that they consider friends. And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's like 15 friends or something, right? I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people. But the average person wants more connectivity, connection than they have. So, you know, there's a lot of questions that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace kind of in-person connections or real life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them, but the reality is that people just don't have the connection and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So
Right, so when he says, is this going to replace, he's referring to these kind of new AI chatbots that Facebook is now rolling out. So if you don't want to talk to an actual human, you can just talk to an AI chatbot on Facebook. And so the aim of these statements is Meta's hope to replace human friends with chatbot products under the guise of combating the loneliness epidemic, as they call it, which is an epidemic that I would argue Facebook kind of started in the first place. So it's kind of interesting to see the future of relationships in Zuckerberg's eyes. And his platforms have always encouraged their users to view friends as content and as resources. So it's kind of no surprise that here he not only presents a very kind of quantified version of what friends are, so saying that they're stats, stats about having friends and friendships, and that he thinks that AI chatbots could be a way to have more friends if you're running low on friends all of a sudden. But to return to the Infinite Office, the reason that I chose this title, and I'm so intrigued by this term in general, is the kind of techno-capitalist hellscape that it portrays, which Zuckerberg is very clearly not scared to lock us into, and was not scared even before Trump was elected for the second term. And so various journalists have also reminded us that the metaverse is enterprise software first and foremost, so meaning that the software is actually targeted at companies and bosses and managers, and not at regular humans using the software to communicate with other people, which is where kind of the term of the Infinite Office comes in. And Rob Horning, who's an American journalist writer, has written, for example, that any efforts to promote the consumer-facing metaverse should be understood as a way to distract us from noticing that trajectory that is a means of trapping and containing labor. So according to Meta, in the future, we will all be working from home, but in an office with all of our colleagues in virtual reality through a headset, making the distinction between work and leisure virtually non-existent. But then I kind of ask this question, are we not already all working all the time? So, of course, with portable technology, we can now be reached by our bosses, let's say, at any point of the day. But even outside of the traditional work setting, we're also laboring for tech companies all of the time, producing content, producing, interacting with other people, so producing data for them that they can now very happily use in order to train their new AI models, which they then send back to us. And if you're interested in this in the subject, I can very much recommend this book, 24/7 Late Capitalism and the Ends of Sleep by Jonathan Crary, which talks about how late capitalism, and of course tech companies play a very big role in this, are trying to encroach on our downtime and the amount that we sleep. And also our kind of understanding of how companies like Meta function and the kind of future that they envision for us has become very opaque and obscure, and we have started to kind of now spread a folklore of the digital age in order to cope with the ever-changing technological environment. And so today I will speak about 5 works of mine, which are all in this show around you, in this exhibition titled Hi NSA and Welcome to My Crib. And they're, as you can see, set up to evoke different rooms in a house. So we have a bedroom, an office, living room, and a kitchen. But they also, the projects themselves, evoke various aspects of surveillance, labor, and data production that are needed to make technologies for companies like Meta function. And these technologies, I think, might make you feel like you are already living in an infinite office in which we are constantly kind of producing data for tech companies. And so I will start with first this project called Advice Well Taken, which is in the living room. And with this project, I became interested in the folklore that exists around technology. So I call this kind of knowledge tech lore, but this is my personal definition of it. So tech lore is information about how to use, fix, or hack technology that is spread in an informal way. And with this project, I was inspired by the Whole Earth catalog. So in case some of you are not familiar with it, it was a catalog that was very popular in the 1960s, in the United States mainly. And it was kind of born out of this counterculture hippie movement, largely in the American West. And so everything that the catalog shared was related to alternative modes of living, alternative education, DIY movements. But what really interested me specifically with this catalog is the fact that it is often considered to be the precursor to the internet in the way that it was sharing and spreading information. So Stuart Brand, who published the catalog, was kind of very much part of the technological, or the scene that then became a technological scene. And so it is said, the folklore around this specific publication is that he kind of inspired the thinking behind the internet. And so doing research on that publication, at some point I asked myself, what would sharing knowledge of tools or their usage look like now? So basically, if we had to create a similar publication today, what would it look like? And that's when I had the thought that the way that we speak about social media or the different digital tools that we use in order to access it, and the way that we kind of share our knowledge about the subject is very similar to more traditional folklore and the ways that different communities were using folkloric stories in the past in order to make sense of the world and of natural occurrences that we didn't understand. So let's say it would start raining on a day and we didn't understand why. So we would say the gods are angry with us if we didn't want it to rain, or we would say the gods are very happy with us if we wanted it to rain. And now we kind of understand more or less why it rains, and we can even maybe predict if it's going to rain on a given day. But what we don't understand today is how our technological tools function. And so I think that we all have friends or people in our lives that often share their comprehensions or miscomprehensions of certain technological tools that might not necessarily make sense to us, or maybe that we don't want to believe. And sometimes that person in your life is the singer Cher, who thinks that her iPad is haunted and has a life of its own. But in my personal life, it's my friend Sophia, who I've known now for 12 years or so. And so over the last 12 years, she has told me a lot of different tech lore stories. And also once I started working with technology, it even increased because I basically became her tech support. And every time something was broken, she would call me and ask for advice. So now I'm going to show a clip of her tech lore that I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with. Can you think of an example of tech lore?
The first one that would come to mind would be the idea of covering your computer camera screen so that like people can't watch you through your camera. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be the first thing that I think of when I think of sort of tech mythology. Like it's like a boogeyman story almost, you know what I mean? Like, oh, cover up your camera or the perverts will get you.
And of course, this is a very clear example of the paranoia of living in the age of surveillance capitalism. So it's always really kind of hard to tell what is real paranoia and should be treated as such, and what is maybe actually founded in truth and should be seriously considered. And so the more that I've been working on this project and the more that I actually just use technology in general, the more I start to think that maybe no paranoia is unfounded and everything has a kernel of truth in it. So maybe some of you remember a few years ago, there was this huge story about how Mark Zuckerberg posted a picture of him working at his desk, and it turned out that he not only covers his web camera, but also his microphone, his computer microphone. And so this led to lots of different articles online that said, Mark Zuckerberg covers his laptop camera, you should consider it too, or it's not paranoia to cover your laptop's webcam. But one of my favorite interviews comes from this artist, Chang, who was also working in the same kind of network of residencies as me. And the reason why I mention it is because he actually works with lots of different technologies. So he works with AI and virtual reality and augmented reality and all of these kind of very sophisticated tools. And yet here's the story that he tells.
Yeah, I think it's a common sense now that we get this personalized ads immediately. Like, what is mostly weird is that, like, before you talk about the thing that you're interested in, even in a table, in a conversation, normally this is the case, right? Like, that you say something, you talk about your cat, and then you immediately get the cat ads. But sometimes and this is only sometimes, you think about something and that shows up there. So I think, and this is very instinctual thinking, like it's very personal, I cannot talk about anyone else, but I think that it captures some kind of like thoughts, not necessarily like verbal, like speech and so on. It can capture some kind of thoughts. So there's kind of like this link.
You think the phones capture brainwaves, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean,
no, I believe
I
you.
mean it. This is of course some kind of thought that comes to my mind, like that I'm having fun with. Like, oh, does it capture my brainwave activities, or what is it like? But it is true. I'm not joking. It is true that sometimes you think about something and you know that you didn't talk about it anywhere, and you see a very specific ad in front of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this was kind of the moment, I mean, this was only the second interview that I did, but it was the moment for me that I was already thinking, okay, it doesn't matter if you work with technology or if you work in a tech company or if you are, you know, very kind of knowledgeable about code or technology. Everyone has these kinds of ingrained ideas and stories about how we imagine our tools function. And so these tech lore stories, they kind of make us feel like we have some agency over these digital tools that in reality we lost already a long time ago, back when we stopped producing our own technology and started outsourcing all of that work to tech companies, who obviously keep their technology super secret because it's their kind of economical model. So this is how they make their money. And I wanted to show one last clip here.
А еще, мне кажется, совет с зубной пастой и вот это, мне кажется, то, что может быть интересно. Зубная паста, нанесение зубной пасты на экран, чтобы, типа, заполнить какие-то царапины.
Что?
Ты никогда не слышала об этом? Нет. Я просто реально боюсь, что я, может, придумываю. Мне кажется, я такое делала, серьезно. Вот, типа, ты наносишь зубную пасту, берешь ватный диск и втираешь, как бы. И таким образом заполняешь какие-то микротрещины на экране.
Yeah, so this was just to give you a bit of a range of the kinds of things that you can see in the project. So it's not just sort of conspiracy theories or weird urban legends. It's also more practical stories about how to go around paths of, like traditional paths of repair if you don't have the money, for example. And so far I just showed you the video part, but there is also a publication, which you can also see there, which kind of provides a resume of the clips that you can then find on a DVD, and can also serve as a guide to the DVD on which all of the clips are shown. And in total, there are 75 clips, so choose wisely. But here's a close-up of one of the spreads, which is a tech lore that seems to be kind of specific to the Netherlands that I heard about, that apparently every person in the Netherlands knows. It's about having square eyes. If you look at the screen, whether it's a TV, computer, telephone, doesn't matter. If you look at a screen for too long, apparently the mythology goes that your eyes will literally turn square. And so it's important to mention that the graphic design of the publication was done by a Thai artist and designer, Supisara Burapachesi, who was living in Rotterdam at the time. And in the publication there are also two texts, one around questions of repair and maintenance by Irish artist and designer Teresa Dillon, and another one more specifically about technological mythologies by Geert Lovink. And next project is in the kitchen. So the project is titled Dasha's Kitchen, My Magical Grilled Cheese Sandwich Recipe. And before I talk about the project itself, it's kind of important to note the context out of which the project was born. So on the 19th of May, 2023, the French government passed this law regarding different measures that they're going to apply in order to make sure that Olympic and Paralympic Games, which took place in Paris, well, in France this past summer, go smoothly. And so in this law, you can find lots of information, let's say, about the stores remaining open on Sundays because tourists are coming, about doping measures for athletes, but also about this very handy new surveillance tool, which was actually already used in France, but on very kind of specific cases, which is called algorithmic video surveillance, but can also be called intelligent video surveillance or augmented video surveillance. And so I found out about this law very randomly when a curator approached me to ask me if I had a work centered on the Olympic flame, to which I said, what the hell are you talking about? Who is producing work about the Olympic flame? But then she mentioned that she had a production budget, so I went home and started doing some research. And then I found out about this law. And so, of course, one of the things that kind of comes up when you start looking into surveillance and the history of surveillance is this guy whose name is Alphonse Bertillon. So he's a French criminologist who is famous for creating the mugshot. So here he's using the mugshot as his own self-portrait, as well as also creating this kind of very wicked-looking IKEA pamphlet, which is actually a way to track criminals in order to check whether they're reoffenders or not. So this was obviously way before technology. But the idea here is to measure every single body part of a person on top of having their name. And then when you bring someone in, you can open your files and see if they've already been kind of to the police precinct before. But the reason why Alphonse Bertillon was interesting to me specifically is because some people consider him to be the father of biometric identification. And so biometric data is kind of one of the main debates around this algorithmic video surveillance law, because under the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation law in the EU, EU countries are not allowed to store biometric data about their citizens. And so the French government was very kind of clear to tell us that they will not be using biometric data in their surveillance. Meanwhile, a French activist group that is specialized in kind of privacy and security called La Quadrature du Net talk about the fact that it's been years that actually the French government has been trying to change the meaning of the biometric data itself in order to signify something very specific, let's say fingerprint identification or iris scans. But in actuality, and this is even the definition from the GDPR law, biometric data refers to physical, physiological, or behavioral characteristics which offer the possibility of confirming someone's identity, which is actually a very vast definition, right? So by this definition, the way that you walk is actually very personally identifiable as you, so you don't need to see someone's face, even just by the way that somebody walks down the street, you might be able to identify someone. And so what the algorithmic video surveillance offers us is this surveillance by algorithms, naturally, which will be able to analyze kind of streams of video in order to find what they've been calling abnormal behavior. And then they have to report it to a human. And so I imagine that the only reason that this kind of human is still kept in the chain is because this is part of the recent also EU legislation called the AI Act, so a specific legislation related to AI, which says that algorithms cannot autonomously make decisions. So there has to be a human that kind of verifies the information that an algorithm has decided and says yes or no. And so some of the examples that we can see here of this abnormal behavior are abandoned objects, presence of a firearm, fire, crowd movements, too high of a density of crowds, etc. And so to give you an idea of the changes that are quite literally taking place is that up until now, surveillance kind of on a city center looked something like this. So you had police officers that were sitting in what are called urban supervision centers, and they had just a ton of screens in front of them. And as you can see, even every screen is already divided into 4 streams of video. And so they were looking at these screens, and they were supposed to find something that was happening that was wrong, right? So somebody being hurt, or I don't know. And guess what? They were not very good at finding things that were going wrong, because the number of surveillance cameras kept going up, and so the number of screens that they had to keep up with also then kept increasing. And so instead of taking down some of the surveillance cameras, which of course would be kind of admitting that they shouldn't have been there in the first place, the French government decided to invest in this very handy new technology, the algorithmic video surveillance, which now basically means that an algorithm looks over all of these streams of video, while a person, instead of having all these screens, is sitting in a room where they just have a black screen in front of them. And so they're just sitting and waiting for something to come up on the screen for them to review. And so, of course, there are lots of issues here, starting from the fact that it's private tech companies that are supplying this technology, and they're actually the ones who are defining what is to be considered abnormal. So, for example, there are cases online that kind of prove that the government actually doesn't get to decide what is considered abnormal. If a tech company wants to track something, or if they don't, this is kind of their way to do it. So also problematic is the fact that these startups are now getting masses of free data and basically content, if you want to call it that, in order to train their algorithms, and then what they do with these algorithms is up to them. And then lastly, also, there is the fact that we are kind of just more likely to trust a machine if a machine says that something is wrong, right? So we kind of imagine that algorithms are these very analytical machines that are not able to make mistakes. So if an algorithm says, hey, something is happening wrong here, we're more likely to agree. And so let's get back to the grilled cheese sandwich. So you might be wondering how that connects to the surveillance topic. And so at this point of the research, I had read so many different texts and started to feel a little lost in the vastness of the research. And so I was like, okay, let's go back to the beginning. How do people explain what an algorithm is? And I went on YouTube, and then I found a ton of video that say that an algorithm is just like a grilled cheese sandwich, or a recipe for a grilled cheese sandwich, rather. And so here's one example of such a video.
An algorithm is just a set of instructions. It's just like a recipe. A more complicated algorithm, called a machine learning algorithm, can help artificial intelligence learn through identifying patterns and considering the results of previous experiences.
Yeah, so this video is not the only one. I kept finding this metaphor of a grilled cheese sandwich, and so then I was like, okay, I know what there is to do. So I came up with this kind of strange idea of making a video that starts out as a recipe for a grilled cheese sandwich, but then it becomes kind of a loop of reaction videos like you can find a lot of on YouTube, so people reacting to other YouTube videos, and then it basically becomes this loop with multiple characters, which are all played by me, and are kind of moving further and further away from a grilled cheese sandwich recipe, talking more about the specific algorithmic video surveillance. So the video is very long, so I won't show it, especially because there's literally 3 of them in the corner, so you can watch it afterwards. But the next project that I wanted to talk about is behind Davor. So was developed during a residency that I did in the Austrian Alps, and it's called Say Yes to Grave. So this was a very quick residency. We were only there for 5 days, but still managed to make something. And during this very quick research phase, we basically became interested in kind of the afterlife in the digital sphere, right? So what happens to your data after you die? Who is actually in control of your data? Let's say if you have a Facebook account and you die, who gets access to the Facebook account? Does Facebook own it? Do your parents control it, or your loved ones, or whatever? And actually, is that content then deleted or not? And so over the 5 days, we did the research, writing, filming, and editing, and also installing of the work, together with Erika Jewell and Lina Schwarzenberg. And what we came up with is this infomercial, so this type of kind of commercials that were popular in the 90s, which had a very clear message. So let's say smoking is bad, you shouldn't smoke. And so we came up with one that is called Say Yes to Grave, in which we basically kind of propose fictional services from a company that provides digital afterlife kind of management. So I can play this video because it's short.
Hey Dasha, do you know what will happen to your files after you die?
No, Erika, I've never thought about it.
Well, Dasha, digital property is a privacy issue.
What do you mean?
You're in control of what you share online and the files you leave on your devices. You should think about your digital presence as something that your loved ones might want to access after you die.
But how am I supposed to do that?
When in doubt about how to manage your information, always remember Grave. 5 easy steps to help you maintain control over your digital afterlife.
G. Get in touch with your digital heirs. R. Remove unwanted files from your storage. A. Allow your heirs to access your passwords. V. Verify that your digital will is in order. E. Erase embarrassing social media content.
Now with Grave, my files are safe. Say yes to Grave! So the point of the project was to make the visitor question who will manage the mass kind of information that we have collected over our lifetimes after you die. And so during the residency, we presented the work in this way with the bench kind of echoing the bench in the video. And then afterwards, we had an exhibition in Linz in Austria where the title of the exhibition was Camping with Computers. So we created kind of a camping setup for the project. And we also decided to turn this video into an installation. So we also added this phone together with a call center guide. And so the phone is interactive. You can try it out later. And you're basically invited to work in our fake company that we've created and to route calls of angry or sometimes happy customers that are calling into the Grave Center and complaining about their digital life. And so now we're getting to the last room of the crib. There's two works here. So the first one is Let Me Fix You, which questions the ethics of implementing robots in the care sector. And we have kind of long been speculating what will be our relationship with robots in the future. So whether they will be our friends, our lovers, our slaves. And in popular culture, science fiction, or even writings on technology, many people have been kind of speculating on this. And at some point I stumbled on these care robots and was quite intrigued by them. And care robots already exist and are kind of widely employed in certain countries, namely Japan and the US, but I think also in other places. And these robots are meant to fill the gaps, if not even replace the work of human caretakers. And so when I found out about these robots a few years ago, I all of a sudden started seeing them everywhere. So they were kind of popping up in popular culture, like in this episode of the Netflix TV show Master of None, or even in an episode of The Simpsons. And so I decided to read a little bit more about them, and I found out that actually many feminist scholars have already been writing very extensively on the subject. So John Tronto is one of the most famous feminist scholars on the ethics of care. And she said that there is an essential difference between caring for and caring about someone, and it's the about part that the robots will never be able to provide, but it's actually essential to the person who is being taken care of. And so she believes that robot caretakers can lead to emotional alienation, physical isolation, and also lack of physical touch. And besides that, also the jobs that are being taken away by these robots are generally jobs that are kind of performed by women, and very often immigrant women that might not necessarily have other options. And so I kept reading different papers online and trying to find as much material as possible, and then was pretty surprised when I came across this interview with Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, who has been called China's AI guru and has worked at Apple, Microsoft, Google, and all of these very big companies.
I believe that elderly care is the job that we as children must do for our parents. And when we don't do it, we must hire a human to do it. In fact, we had a robotic entrepreneur who built a robot and found that elderly people only primarily use one function: customer service. They click customer service, a video of a human customer service comes up and says, "What's wrong with your robot?" And then the elderly person proceeds to say, "Why didn't my son call me today? Let me show you a picture of my granddaughter." Because people really want to connect with other people. Elderly people, lonely people in particular, giving them primitive, fake, and inanimate and non-emotional robots to interact with is a very cruel thing.
You're known as the AI guru, and I thought you would have thought these were wonderful ways of perhaps, it's not a human being, but it's a small, consolation still to have an inanimate object to relate to.
So actually, maybe this should be shown to Mark Zuckerberg to kind of think about his proposal of having AI chatbots be your friends instead of humans. But it was interesting to see, exactly this person say this. And in the interview later on, he explains why he thinks that way, which is that his mother has Parkinson's and he and his family was taking care of her, and so he could actually kind of firsthand experience how important it is to take care of someone. And so once I'd gathered all of this information, I still didn't know how to present my research, and this is a very important point for me in all of my work. So I want to present the kind of theoretical research in a way that is as accessible as possible, so that even if a child sees it, maybe they don't understand everything, but they can kind of get a general idea of what the project is about. And so at this moment, I kind of randomly stumbled upon this YouTube subsection of robotic ASMR. So very often performed, as you can see, by young women who sometimes put something to make them seem like engineers. So sometimes they're wearing glasses, or they have like a smudge of dirt on their face or something like this. And so they're pretending that the viewer is a broken robot that they're replacing. And at this point, I had like a light bulb moment, like, yes, okay, now I know what I'm going to do. So people were kind of gaining familiarity with ASMR at the time, and I decided to make my own robot ASMR video, of course wearing glasses because I'm an engineer. But so in this video, I am the mechanic who tries to repair a care robot, not only, to find out that the care robot is not actually broken, but has basically gained an understanding that it cannot kind of properly take care of a human because it is not human itself. And the last project is this pillow, so something that I worked on during the COVID lockdown. It's called Do Humans Dream of Online Connection? And this project is a hand embroidery of a telephone on a pillowcase, so it's, at the time it was twice the size of my iPhone at the time. And the idea for me was to connect two objects that we kind of come into contact with on a very intimate basis, so our phones and the pillow. And so this was actually following another project that I had done just before the COVID confinement, during which I spent maybe 2 or 3 years working on basically our addiction to technology and the physical impacts that technology creates. And during that time, I felt like I had gotten very good about using my phone, or rather not using my phone. So kind of being very conscious about the amount of time that I was spending online and trying to stay away from it. And then the COVID confinement came, and all of that was kind of thrown out the window because all of the interactions were happening online. All of a sudden, like everything was mediated by technology. And so I started carrying my phone everywhere. I mean, I was living in a very small apartment, but I still always had it in my hand or in my pocket. And I started sleeping with my phone under the pillow, which is where this idea first came from. And so I wanted to place a phone on the pillow to draw attention of the viewer on the amount of time that we kind of spend in this state of constant connection. And of course, the people who are creating these devices or the various apps that we can find on them want to make us spend as much time as possible on the devices because, as I mentioned earlier, that is their kind of economical model. So the more attention that we give, the more money the company makes. And it seems that the only way or the only time that we manage to spend away from our technology is while we sleep. So this is kind of the only space that is yet to be infiltrated by notifications. And Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix, has actually said in the past that his only enemy is sleep, that, you know, other entertainment companies or tech companies are not kind of his competitors. It's sleep that is his main competitor. And then the company itself has tweeted out something similar in 2017. And so we know that companies will stop at nothing in order to conquer our attention, and even the need for sleep might just be a temporary obstruction. And so I would like to finish this presentation with a quote from the book that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, 24/7, by Jonathan Crary, in which he says that sleep is the only remaining barrier, the only enduring natural condition that capitalism cannot eliminate. And at the end of the book, Crary also says that it's possible that at some point the imaginings of a future without capitalism will begin as dreams of sleep. Because at this point, sleep is the only activity that reminds us of the cyclical patterns of nature, which are essential to our kind of being and to all life on Earth in general. And so I just wanted to mention especially the second quote, because maybe some of the things that I've talked about, even though I talk about them in a lighthearted way, are pretty depressing. But I think that it's kind of an uplifting suggestion from Jonathan Crary that maybe we can find a way to fight back through sleeping or while sleeping. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Otherwise, enjoy my crib.